Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Buzzard. A lot of the times when I review smaller, lower stakes films, it kind of gives me more of an emotional response. This is kind of a con movie. This is kind of a smaller character study con movie. But the thing with smaller stakes cons or mysteries is that I can relate to that more than like a big Hollywood con movie. That to me is a fantasy. I've never done that. I've never really done a small con either. I've never done a con of any sort. When it's a smaller stakes film, it almost feels more understandable. It almost feels more real to me. And the character in this film, Marty, played by Joshua Burge, is really someone I've encountered in my real life, in high school, at work, in many different places. And so in a lot of ways, this film felt almost like too real. It reminded me of myself a little when I was younger, and it was a little hard, to be honest, to separate myself from the film and my own personal feelings. And sometimes with smaller films that happens because you kind of feel closer to it, because I can relate more. It does feel like something I could be experiencing. I know it's like fiction, but it hits me harder. And Buzzard is a black comedy, and that might make you think it's kind of making fun of this character, but it's not. But at the same time, it finds him funny. It finds funny things about him. It's kind of like what Mike Judge did with something like King of the Hill, in a way that you can still laugh at him in certain regard, and you can get his ridiculous paranoia, but they still kind of have respect for him while still noting some of his more ridiculousness. It's a really interesting character study con movie of someone on both the brink of poverty and when you really are in that kind of situation, more of a Midwestern town, and how it's hard to get out of it, and how useless you can feel, and how you feel like you need to be doing these things, while also understanding how ridiculous and lame all of that is. A guy named Marty, played by Joshua Burge, who has a job at a mortgage firm at a bank. It's a shitty job. He's making like $9.50 an hour, even though he has to wear a tie and everything like that, which is like even worse if you're making shitty money. He has various scams. He orders the most expensive office supplies from the office and then sells them back to Office Depot for cash. He tries to get as many Hot Pocket coupons as he can through Hot Pocket by complaining that something was wrong with them. He even cashes out his checking account to open a new one so he can get $50. He tries every scam he can possibly do, or every advantage he can possibly find. And he hates his job, even leaves for 3 hours just cuz, and comes back and no one even really notices he was gone for more than an hour. And then he one day is given lots of checks that are kind of tax refunds that came back to the bank, and he has to contact the people and try to send them to them. And after he really doesn't get anywhere trying to call these people, but they either hang up on him or aren't there, he decides to, one of the worst con ideas ever, sign the back of the check and say it's being endorsed to him, because he realizes he can do that after his mom sends him a check for his birthday but writes his sister's name on it. Of course, he does these several at a time, which is kind of a bad idea. But he starts doing that, and then over his paranoia decides to disappear and kind of hide in his friend's basement and keep hiding so they don't discover he's stolen all these checks, which amount to about $2,000. This film, which is directed by Joel Petroikis, is part of his Animal trilogy. I actually haven't seen it. It's a short film and another film before this. I'd like to actually see his other film. I didn't even know about this director before. I just heard about this movie. One of the good things about Marty, and one of the things I related to with this character, is he has an apartment just draped in all these horror movie posters and several Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy Krueger posters, and he decides to make this glove out of his Power Glove, which the Power Glove sucked as a controller. I mean, every time you go to some kid's house, you'd be like, oh, let's play it, and he'd be like, oh, this sucks, never mind, let's go back to the regular control. I mean, it never fucking worked, I don't think. It was cool looking though. So he realizes it sucks, although he should have realized that before, but he decides to take it. He cuts off the cord end and starts making it half Power Glove, half Freddy Krueger glove, and has these blades on it. It definitely looks really cool, and this is the kind of guy that really is, that horror movie obsessed, video game playing kind of guy who just tries to get as many scams as he can. In some ways, I think when I look at the character of Marty, I felt very trapped by it, because I've seen so many guys like that who don't really try to improve their lives whatsoever. They're kind of just stuck in this one corner and they're never really getting out of it. Anybody I've known like that, when they get into any kind of trouble situation, they act like kind of an animal that's kind of stuck in a corner and needs to fight their way out of it. And Marty, and the performance by Josh Joshua Birch, which is a really great performance, actually. He's an actor I'd like to see in more stuff because I think he has a real presence about him. He has an unusual look. He kind of reminds me of kind of that older kind of Peter Lorre-esque actor. Has an unconventional look, but really has the acting ability to really back it up. I've known people like that, and so it does feel like you're trapped. I know so many people who've never really gotten out of it and don't try to evolve. And Marty does feel that way, but this film definitely shows how ridiculous he is. Like, you'd think, like, maybe, like, do one check a month or something, you know, over an amount of time, but he just does a bunch at once and is afraid he'll get caught because his boss tells him that we actually can see both sides of the check. You look at your bank account when you send out a check or when you deposit a check, it can show you that on your bank statement, usually online. So he didn't think of that because he doesn't really like computers. The paranoia that sets in is totally like one of those guys where they disappear for a while because they've done some strange con, and he didn't really absolutely need to. I'm sure he would have just gotten fired or something. A lot of these smaller stakes character studies always remind me of the film Marty, and I think the thing with the film Marty is a good guy. Marty is a nice guy, you know, you love Marty. A nice, relatable, good guy is good to his mom. He loves his girlfriend. And Marty in Buzzard, it's kind of like the same idea as the movie Marty starting Ernest Borgnine. This is a different movie, and this is a different Marty. This Marty is more of a complicated person. He's still obsessed with Freddy Krueger and all the things he grew up with in the 80s. He doesn't feel like he's really evolving, and he feels like he's just doing all the things he can have to keep his lifestyle going, but not really thinking about much of a future. Joel Petroikis, who directs this film, I think does it really well. He lets him do his ridiculous behavior and stays on it. There's one shot of him just eating spaghetti and meatballs when he gets room service in this hotel, and he just stays on the shot forever, and it's a ridiculous shot. This is the fanciest that Marty thinks this can really get, is eating spaghetti and meatballs room service in a corporate hotel. And it kind of says a lot about that character and that worldview, that you would think that you're in that place, not to be, you know, I'm a snob or something, but that's the height of what you can do, is like just something as simple as spaghetti and meatballs. It cuts into that way that you're living in a crappy job in the Midwest, you know, his friends living in his house with his dad, they hang out in his basement a lot where Marty's trying to hiding out. You feel so in that trapped world and you kind of understand it, but you can also kind of laugh at the situations, and I think that's one of the strong suits of this film. When I watched it, I was really depressed because it really made me feel trapped in that situation. I still knew this film was very funny, and it is very funny, but it's a really dark kind of a funny film. Joshua Birch is playing this kind of nerdier character. His nerds are dorky or whatever, that kind of a character is into all these sort of worlds, but their worlds aren't really captured in the kind of movies they actually like. They're kind of more work for a film like Buzzard. It's interesting capturing a character like this who's not very social. He feels like he's just in high school. He feels like guys I knew in high school. He has no ambitions to go anywhere. He likes to fuck with the system. He has that kind of teenage attitude towards everything. In a way, maybe that's why he hasn't gone any further, but you do feel that trappedness where you know he isn't going to go that much further, but him as a character shows you a world that I think a lot of movies try to show characters who are more immature. The Hollywood version, or the more typical version, really is to show that character kind of evolving and changing, and I don't really think Marty changed. He's kind of like the way he is. He's going to keep calling Hot Pockets to try to get coupons. He's going to keep trying to find scams to make a little extra money, and he's not making very much. I think that's really what makes him sympathetic, is that poverty. When you're thinking of these characters, these kind of more sympathetic character pieces, when you have someone who's really antisocial and unsympathetic, it kind of makes you question that. It makes you question that as a viewer. It does make you second guess his decisions a lot of the time, and makes you think about his life in a way that I don't think I question those other characters' lives as much. When you have these kind of smaller stories, you really do think about that person's life. A lot of times, the character of Marty, you do feel like he's just trapped in a corner and he can't get out of it, and he's just trying to use every little idea he can to get out of it, but none of them are going to really push him that much further. I haven't seen a film capture being stuck in that situation quite as well, showing someone who has no real ambition to get out, but doesn't even really know how to approach that, and how kind of trapped that can be without kind of showing him like, oh, what a fuck up, whatever. It's funny kind of how lame some of that stuff is, but at the same time, you know, there's not much he can really do besides that. And it's a character that, and a person that you look at and you go like, damn, you know, you were so cool, you have so many ideas, but what else are you gonna do? And it kind of makes you think about that situation. But also his extreme paranoia in the movie makes you realize like maybe he gets in these messes because his own brain comes up with just bizarre ways to put himself into these situations. He didn't really need to run away, he didn't need to disappear from work and all these things, but he does so anyway. He puts himself in those extremes, and dealing with those people is often really hard. Being put into that world, but also kind of seeing both the sympathetic side of it, the sad side of it, the crazy side of it. It kind of gives you a well-rounded side to this whole thing, is just seeing like how someone could really be stuck in that and why they can't really get out of it, and how that personality is trapping them, but also the financial constraints of it. Buzzard captures both his character's immaturity and his poverty and doesn't really let go of either. It kind of shows you both in an even-keeled way that both makes you understand kind of the faults of this character, but also understands the faults of the situation he can't get out of. It's very small, there's not many characters, the sound's not the greatest in some points. It's a film that really stuck with me and really hit me very hard, and I think it shows the impact that Joel Petroikis can really have and what he can really do with a certain character, and let you just kind of open up in that world where it feels very small, but the personality to it and the personal feel of it felt a lot larger, and it felt like something you could get really lost in, as much as Marty is lost in this entire crazed paranoia type of a scam. So if you have seen Buzzard and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.